We did a Schengen video a year ago, and we are still getting questions asked on that video. There are also a couple things that have changed that you need to be aware of, and we're going to cover those questions and what's changed in this video.
So what is the Schengen Zone? The Schengen Zone consists of 27 countries that basically do not have a border in between. So when you are traveling and say you are in this area, you get to just travel freely through the 27 countries.
Nothing to worry about. No stamps, no nothing. You just can go as you please. But you only get 90 days. And we're going to explain how all that works.
So like Brian said, you get 90 days. So that 90 days is 90 out of 180. And it is a rotating calendar. So if you basically take a calendar in front of you and you go back 180 days on that calendar and count as many days as you were in the Schengen, if it comes up to, say, 85 days in that last 180, you have 5 days left.
This is the number one question we get to this day from that video over a year ago. For whatever reason, it sounds complicated, but it's not.
It's really not.
It's really not. You get 90 days of 180.
Now, the easiest way to handle this is to get a calculator online. It is very simple. Just Google Schengen calculator. There are multiple websites that you can use. None of them are better than the other. They just offer something different. On these websites, what you're going to do, it's going to ask you your entry date into the Schengen Zone. It's going to ask you your exit date out of the Schengen Zone. You can have multiple entries and exits, and then it is going to tell you how many days you have left in Schengen, making it honestly very seamless.
Very seamless. Now, the calculator I use, what keeps me on track personally, is Carrie. She takes care of all that for me. So she's like my app, so to speak. But get the app if there's any confusion at all.
One thing that you want to make sure and take into account is that your travel days. So say that you have left the Schengen Zone, but you are going to be flying for us home to the United States, but we're going to land in Rome. And even though we are not going to exit that airport, it still is going to count as a day in the Schengen, even though all you are doing are switching planes, because it is going to involve border control, stamping your passport. So you need to make sure to, when you are going to be traveling, don't go all the way up to that 90 days. Allow a couple days for travel days.
What happens if your plane gets canceled or something personal happens and you're unable to leave when you thought you were going to? Well, leave yourself some time. Okay, so if you're able to move freely through these 27 countries at your leisure, how do they know where you've been, where you're going, where you're at? How do they know? Well, they scan you when you come in and they scan you when you leave.
Yeah.
If you're over that allotted period of time, they're gonna know.
Yeah.
So don't take the chance. There are things that can happen. If you do overstay your welcome.
And we'll get into that, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get into all that too.
Yeah. Now, you may be saying to yourself, like, can you skirt around this? And are they really going to get you on this, right? We've been scrutinized at the border crossings, and it all comes down to the agent that you have. And we've had them look, especially because at some points, you know, you're talking, for us, I think it was when we were going home. And so we've been gone for, say, 5.5 months, and they're looking at our passport, and they're like, where have you been? And you're having to account for all the places you visited.
We've been to here, we've been to here, we've been to here. So that opens up a can of worms for us. This one particular agent started going through our book. She was looking for that stamp. They didn't have a scanner where we were at the time at the airport. She called somebody else over. They both went through our passports together. Now, we knew we were compliant because we saved ourselves some time. So we were okay. They came to the same conclusion and we were on our way. Yeah. But if we had been over, we would have been deported probably.
Right.
Probably thrown in jail.
And who knows what happens at that point, honestly, but is it really worth the risk? So we just always veer on the side of just stay within the rules.
Well, who knows what can happen, but what could happen is you can get banned from the Schengen area, so you can't go into those 27 countries for a period of time. I've heard it's up to 3 to 5 years. So we're not taking that chance for sure. You can get fined, which we don't have any money, so we don't want to get fined. And, you know, there's other things that you can get deported. They can send you back to your home country.
Right.
All things that we don't want to happen to us just for simply overstaying our welcome. Now, I've overstayed my welcome before a few times at people's houses or parties and whatnot. You really don't get punished for that. This you get punished for.
I don't know. Were you invited back?
I don't think I've been invited back. I'm thinking it.
So he was punished.
I was punished.
Just don't get punished.
Now, what has changed since we did this video over a year ago? Well, there's been two big changes. One of them is it used to be 26 countries, now it's 27 countries. Croatia has been added. There are other countries, Romania, Bulgaria, a couple others, Cyprus, I believe, are in the process of joining, so things can always change moving forward.
Yeah, so keep track.
Keep track of that if you're planning on going to any of those Balkan state countries. Now, the ETIAS. ETIAS? I think for short. Anyway, that is a visa that you're going to have to fill out online. They want you to do it up to 14 days before you enter. All that is a security check. They just want to know who you are, why you're coming. From what we understand, it's just like getting any other visa to any other country that requires it. Simple. You can get denied, and if so, there is an opportunity to appeal. So that's why you want to do the process early.
Yeah. Now, this was in play when we did our video a year ago, but it got delayed. And so now they're saying 2024 is going to be the date. Obviously, there's not a set date. They're just saying 2024. So that may change. Once again, just kind of keep track of that. We will put the website down below so you can keep watch for that when it does go
when that date does come into effect.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, you know, people look at something like this as like it's a really big deal. It's not. It's a simple application online. It is €7 to apply for. Like Brian said, they say to do it 14 days ahead of time, but your approval process is minutes to a max of 96 hours. So it's not like you have to do it a long time ahead because you're waiting for your approval. Well, in a sense, it's waiting for approval, right? In case they need more information from you. Now, the other question is how long is this good for? Do I have to fill this out every single time that I want to come in? No, you do not. After you've applied and been approved, you are good for 3 years. So honestly, €7 for 3 years is not bad.
It's not a big deal.
It's not a big deal.
I think if you don't have a U.S. passport, I think you have to do this to get into the United States, I believe. And there are other countries, obviously, that do the same thing.
Right. I mean, we just yesterday did our application to go to Turkey. And that was $51 each just to get in. And that is only for
$51 each?
Yes. And that's only for your one visit. You know, I mean, well, it's good for 180 days, I should say. But so 3 years for €7, that's a bargain.
$51? Now, we've been told by many, based off our video a year ago, that they enter and exit all the time. They don't worry about Schengen rules. They just hop over to Morocco for the day and come back to Spain, and it's all good. That's not true. Don't do that. You will eventually get caught.
Yeah.
The people that tell us that are just getting lucky, honestly.
Right.
And we're not willing to take that risk.
Yeah, it really 100% comes down to your border agent when they are looking at your passport, how well it was scanned at each location or whatever. And, you know, so it's up to you, but just
it's up to you.
Just stay within the rules.
Follow the rules.
90 days is a long time.
Yeah.
Now, another option and something that always comes up that people tell us, in case we didn't know, but we do, that you can extend your visas in certain countries based on what passport you have.
Right.
We are aware of this. One of the places that we do know and know people who have done this is in Portugal. You can extend your visa with a U.S. passport and get an additional 90 days. The downside, or the, I wouldn't say downside, but the one side to that is you have to stay in Portugal for that other 90 days. You cannot then freely travel. So with that comes the next question. How are they going to know if you've crossed over into Spain or if you have traveled somewhere else in that 90 days because you're not actually doing border crossings? Well, here's a great example for you. We went from Austria to Germany and we were on a bus and there was a random stop at a, really wasn't a border crossing, but it was a border stop or custom control.
It was just control. Yeah.
Everybody had to get off of the bus, and thank goodness we had even thought to bring our passports for that trip, and they checked all
Carrie thought of it. I never would have thought of that. Carrie thought of that.
We'd still be there.
Yeah, we'd still be there.
But they checked us, you know, and there's no border crossing there. So sure, you can risk it, but is it worth that risk?
No. Now, there is another way to extend that 90 days depending on where you're from. There are a lot of countries that have bilateral agreements. United States, New Zealand, Canada. There's several countries that have bilateral agreements with, say, Italy or Portugal or Poland, Germany, where you can extend your visa as well, just because you're coming from, say, New Zealand.
Right.
So there are other ways to do it. Have that paperwork with you. Don't just assume that the border agent's going to know, because again, it comes down to the border agent.
Well, and I think that's the downside of this one. A lot of people have said to us, do you know you can do this? We do know you can do this, but we've also talked to people that on both sides of it, or we've heard from people on both sides of it. There is zero guarantee. This is written up in paperwork that there is this bilateral agreement. There's nothing that you just go online and fill out paperwork and boom, you have it in hand and you get to just enter for an extra amount of time. Right. You go in with, like Brian said, the paperwork, the bilateral agreement, and show it to the agent and hope that that agent is going to be like, oh, yep, I know all about that. Sure, here you go. Don't
go in and say, I'm an American. I can stay as long as I want to. That probably isn't going to fly.
So with that bilateral agreement, I think that's the biggest thing for us. There's no guarantee. It's not a simple process, and that is one of the reasons we have personally not chosen to pursue it. If you have, say you're already in a location, you want to stop at a border crossing and ask them about extending, that might be easy. But would you plan a trip around it? Would you get a flight?
You wouldn't.
Get to the airport and hope with all hopes that they let you do this.
Now, if you have done this, let us know what process you went through and how it worked out.
What country? And what country you did it, and where you were entering at. Did you go? Was it at the airport, or were you doing a border crossing?
Yeah, let us know how it works, because we are genuinely interested in knowing.
Well, and I think the viewers would like to know.
Yeah. Now, what about cruise ships and leaving the Schengen on a boat, but having ports within the Schengen? Now, we learned this the hard way. We're leaving the Schengen earlier than we had anticipated for this very reason. We're heading to Turkey about 10 days early, because to get home on our 5.5-month journey this time, we're doing a relocation cruise from Rome to Florida with 10 stops within Schengen territory. So we looked up on the cruise ship, we did our research, and it turns out those days count. Yeah. So make sure you're aware of that.
Right, and those days count even if you choose not to get off the ship, or like we will have days at sea while we're in Schengen zone, but we're still within Schengen, so we're going Schengen, day at sea, and then Schengen. That all counts as Schengen time.
Yes.
So until you've left your final port that is leaving Schengen zone, you are considered Schengen. And once again, how do they track this? They are tracking it. They're scanning your passport. They know that you're on that ship. Once again, do you really want to show up at the ship and have them say, sorry, you don't have enough Schengen time, you're not, get on the flight, go home.
See ya.
So that's just something to be aware of, because that's a really common thing to come and travel and then hop on a ship, and you may think, you don't have to count that time, but you do. Now, like we mentioned in the beginning, since putting out our last video, there are repeat, very common questions we get. We don't mind getting these questions, but we just want to make sure we're providing you the information. The one big question we get is, what calculator do you use? Now, we already discussed this, and like we said, any of the calculators are good. We will put a link to just one of them down below. Like I said, any of them are good. Right. So, yeah.
I use Carrie.
Use the Carrie calculator. You can't use that calculator. Don't send me your itinerary. We've gotten that question.
Yes.
And you want me to do your Schengen calculations for you. I do say it's easy, but not easy enough that I want to do everybody's Schengen calculations.
Yeah, we don't want to be wrong on your dime.
Yeah, no, exactly.
For sure.
Yeah, we will provide you the link to a calculator, though.
Now, the other common question we get is, can you do this or can you do that? The answer is probably no. You can't leave for a day and come back in and restart the clock. You can't go to Morocco or bounce over to Turkey and then come back. It does not work that way. And we've had plenty of people say, I do it all the time.
Yeah.
Yes, it does work that way.
On that note of like leaving for one day and coming back for a day, there are countries where that happens. Thailand, that's one of them. You know, you can leave, you can reset and come back to places. Europe is not one of them.
No, you can't do it.
No.
Now, what do you do then? So where do you go? Well, there are other options. There's Romania, like we did last year. Highly suggest getting to Romania, whether you're trying to get out of the Schengen or not. Romania is a very cool country.
Yeah.
You can go to
Turkey,
Bosnia,
too.
Turkey. There are plenty of options. Last year we did Romania, Serbia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and Croatia. Can't do Croatia anymore.
We were we left Croatia and they joined the Schengen a month after we left. So we timed that perfectly because we were there for 2 months.
And we also left about 2 weeks before they're in the World Cup semifinals. So we missed that as well.
That was kind of a bummer.
That would have been awesome.
Yeah, that would have been fun to be there. Another really common question that we get often is, do you need a round trip ticket when you're flying into the Schengen zone? Do you need to show when you're leaving within that 90 days? No, you do not. That is where kind of that whole trust system comes in and the stamping you in and out of places. So if you were, say, flying into Krakow like we did, and then you want to just travel by car, train, bus, whatever you're doing, no flights involved, and then you have a ticket to fly home from Paris, that's completely fine. You don't have to show any level of proof of you when you're leaving Schengen.
Right, because they're going to stamp you when you come in, they're going to stamp you when you leave.
Right.
So they'll know.
The one thing that I would note is that say you're coming into Schengen zone, you're then leaving Schengen zone, and you're just going to be traveling around say you went to Romania for a little bit, but you got there by bus or train or whatever. Make sure you're getting those stamps, because we've gone to a lot of places and you don't get your stamp. And say then you go and you drive and you're now back in Schengen zone and you fly out of Schengen and they're like, wait a minute, we show that you've been here for all this time. Have some kind of paperwork. If it isn't a stamp, at least have some documentation showing your time. I would think even being able to show a hotel reservation, something just showing that you did actually exit the zone, because it is becoming more and more common where they do not stamp you all the time.
They look at it, they scan it, and they hand it back. Ask for a stamp, they'll give you one. Is there a cap on how many times you can enter and exit Schengen? No, there is not. You can do it as many times as you want. Just have that calculator out and ready to go, because that's going to be a lot of calculating.
It's a lot of calculating to do within that, especially, the rolling
The rolling thing, We tend to stay for about 87, 88 days, and then we exit. This time we're staying for even less because of our cruise home.
Right.
But you can enter and exit as many times as you'd like.
Probably the biggest question that we have, or the biggest comment we get, is they don't really know. And I know we have mentioned this before through here, but this is just a comment people like to make. They don't know. Maybe because you arrived at a border crossing and they looked at your passport and then they handed it back to you. You didn't see them stamp it. That doesn't mean you didn't see them scan it. So they are being scanned. If they're not stamped, there is tracking that's going on. Once again, not worth the risk. Just follow the rules.
Just follow the rules. What about visas? Work visa, retirement visas, things like that. That is a whole different video that I don't think we're prepared to do right now.
No.
But there are ways you can stay longer if you're working, and that's just something you're going to have to do some research on.
You will, because that's always going to vary on what country you're from, what country you're going to, what kind of visa you're looking for. So honestly, that is a video that we have done in the past a little bit of, but it's going to be so country specific. Being slow travelers, we've been asked multiple times why we have not taken advantage of the bilateral agreement that the United States has with multiple countries, especially over here in Europe. Like we explained, there is not a whole lot of guarantee to these agreements as far as getting it all, the application, or getting the agent to agree to it, and we just haven't done it yet, and we may at some point.
We do know people that have applied for a visa extension in Portugal.
We do plan to do that.
We do plan on doing something like that in the future, but right now we like moving around a little more, where 90 days is plenty. We want to go to some of those other countries that are still in Europe, but not in the Schengen.
It kind of opens up that opportunity to go see those places. Romania, which we have mentioned. Romania was really not on our radar when we ended up going there. And all of a sudden we're like, okay, we need to exit Schengen. And it pushed us into areas that we might not have gone otherwise. And so there's kind of a cool part of that.
So if you have any other questions, go ahead and ask. We love answering your questions. We read them all. We answer as many of them as we can. Hopefully this clarified some of the misconceptions of the ETIAS or Schengen in general, because it's really not that complicated. And honestly, 90 days is a long time. So thank you for watching this video, and we'll see you in the next one.
All right, cheers. Want to drive from Italy to Spain, you can do that.
Easy. No checks, nothing's going on.
Is Italy right next to Spain?
It's not. You have to go through France. But
I know. I was just thinking that. I was like, wait a minute. You're
that's a
not.
blooper right
And
there.
then you go, it's easy.
Yeah, it's easy. You can get there.
Drive onto a ferry.